So on my last video, I promised you I'd do a comparison video between the Farr and Swit WAYFINDER Diver 40 and the Citizen PROMASTER. And it's a good comparison because they're similar in price, they serve the same purpose in my collection, they have a lot of the same attributes, and there are some special features about them that kind of stand out. But only one of them will be staying in my collection, and I've got no horse in the race here, okay? I paid for both of these. This particular channel is called Why We Buy It for a reason, right? I'm not just getting given watches to do puff pieces on and then sending them back. These are watches I've bought, and I share with you why I bought them. But only one of them is going to stay in my collection because I keep an 8-watch collection, and essentially they serve the same purpose, which is to be my beater watch / travel companion, okay? And I'll get into what's similar about them and what's different, and I'll give each particular category a rating as to who wins and who loses, and in the end, I'll make my decision. You make your decision and let me know which one you would keep in the comments at the end of the video. Let's get into it. Before we zoom in and get a closer look at both models, let's talk about the packaging to begin with, because they both have very interesting packaging. It's not your usual box in a box, okay? It's not that. So I'll begin with the Farr and Swit, and the Farr and Swit is kind of cool in that it comes in a dry bag, right? It actually comes in a dry bag, and this is something that I've never seen any other watch come in, and the fact that it's a dive watch kind of makes sense that they include a dry bag for your other valuables you may take with you when you're getting aquatic, so to speak. Inside, you've got a very simple box, right? Your very typical box, but keep in mind, Microbrand, inexpensive model. And then, of course, you have the watch. I have some extra links because I sized it to me. But yeah, very basic box, right? So what really stands out to me here, of course, is the dry bag. And that was kind of like a welcome addition because we've actually reviewed dry bags on the channel and talk about their use case, and it is something we actually use when we're traveling, so I'll get some use out of this. Got to give them some points for that, right? Then when I move on to the Citizen PROMASTER, now the box is a bit beat up, but that's because I got a deal on this because the box was beat up. To be fair, I got a deal on the Farr and Swit as well because I purchased it at the Toronto Timepiece show and they had a special deal going for the show. So I got a little bit off both of these particular watches. But when you open this primary box, it's when it gets interesting because unlike your typical watch box, the Citizen PROMASTER being a diver's watch, right? It's got that ISO 6425 certification. To accentuate the fact, they package it in this little case that looks like an oxygen tank. And I mean, it's actually one of the cooler things about the watch. It makes for a very nice presentation if you want to kind of show it off on your side table by your bed or, you know, maybe in your man cave or what have you, but it's a cool addition to the watch. Now, I have done videos where I talked about how much money are we losing by putting items we wear in our wrist in fancy cases we're never going to use, right? And that's sort of the case here. I don't display this. I keep it in the box, right? The watches generally stay in my watch box. I just wanted to put this in the box itself to kind of give you the full presentation idea of how it looks. And this is kind of cool too. But this is obviously a little more elaborate than including a dry bag. But the dry bag I'll actually use, right? I'll actually get some actual use out of it. The dry bag isn't wasted money to me because it's going to come with us on our next vacation. This case definitely will not. Now, if you're looking at resale value, this has obviously got a better resale value attached to it than a dry bag. But in this particular category, when it comes to packaging, I got to give it to Farr and Swit because it's not a waste. It's something you're actually going to use. And that's not something I've received from anyone else I've purchased from. Not a single other brand. Some brands include watch rolls. You can use that, but I have better watch cases I prefer, right? This is cool. Don't get me wrong. It's kind of awesome, but I gotta go with the dry bag. So the point goes to the Farr and Swit in the first category, which is packaging. So when we get into the direct comparison of the two watches, the one thing I'm not going to really factor in here is price, because they're really close in price, very close in price. They're both in and around that $500 level, give or take, depending on sales. And I mean, Citizen sometimes, because it's such a large brand, you can find them from gray market dealers for less. I got the deal on the Farr and Swit Wayfinder because of the Toronto Timepiece show. I got a better deal on the Citizen PROMASTER because it was a damaged box, but they're generally around the same price, so I'm not going to factor that in. The first thing when you're factoring in a dive watch is its dive capability, right? That's a big factor. And we could debate, really, about which you would prefer here. Now, I have my own opinions, and that's what this video is about, so I'm going to go with my opinion. But if you want to debate with me in the comments, feel free, because the Farr and Swit Wayfinder has 300 meters of water resistance, whereas the Citizen PROMASTER has 200 meters, 100 meters less. But the Citizen PROMASTER is actually a diver's watch, right? It is ISO 6425 certified. It is a diver's compliant watch. This is effectively a true tool watch, and that has been certified for its use purpose, which is to go diving with. This is not. This has had a Chinese manufacturer who designed the case promise the buyer, in this case, Farr and Swit, that you're going to get around 300 meters of water resistance with this, but there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee. There's no secondary company that goes ahead and actually certifies the properties of this particular watch like they did with the Citizen PROMASTER. So for me, it's the PROMASTER by a wide margin here, because it's got that certification. It wins the diver's water resistance test between the two of them, because this has not been tested for that particular reason. So I got to give the point to the PROMASTER. Let's talk about the bracelets. The bracelets are very similar. They're both relatively comfortable. They're not exceptional bracelets by any means, but then again, these are not expensive watches, but they're good bracelets. They both have a double fold over clasp, right? With milled foldable sections here, right? The PROMASTER's is a little more chunky. That may appeal to you, may not. For me, no difference. But the advantage here will go to the PROMASTER. And that's because it's got a diver's extension. Essentially, an on-the-fly micro adjust, right? It's got that additional feature that the Farr and Swit does not. So with everything else being relatively equal, it's obvious that the point goes to the Citizen PROMASTER strictly because of that extension. Is it something I use? No, I don't. But I at least have the option to use it if I ever come across a situation where it's necessary, whereas I don't have that option with the Farr and Swit Wayfinder. So obviously, when people talk about how a Microbrand offers generally more value, and why in that particular video and review of the Farr and Swit Wayfinder I said that's not a factor for me, because it isn't always the case. It really isn't. What a Microbrand has to offer, and I'll say it again, is something unique. And there is some unique properties about this particular watch, and we'll get into that a little further into this comparison. But one of the things you have to really like about a watch is how it wears. And these two watches wear very different, in fact, very different. And it's a matter of balance, I think, as to why that's the case. So I'm going to throw on my Citizen PROMASTER here. And it sits perfectly snug, right? It's a very good fit with the bracelet. But what I find when I wear this, especially if I hold my hand in this position, is that it's very top heavy, extremely heavy. This case is chunky. It is a slab of a case. It's not a particularly large watch, but I mean, it's chunky. If I try and get my sleeve over it, I can, but like it sits pretty damn high and I can feel the weight. When I wear this for a full day, I feel the weight toward the end of the day. It's not something I feel with a lot of my watches because if you follow the channel, you know I wear a lot of dress watches. I wear a lot of light watches. This is not that. Now, if I switch over to the Farr and Swit Wayfinder, it's a very different wearing experience. Again, I get a very good fit with the bracelet, no problem adjusting it to the size of my wrist. But this I almost don't feel. It disappears on my wrist. If I'm moving my wrist around a bit, sure, I can feel it, you know, the weight tug at different points. But when I'm just relaxed, doing my regular everyday thing, I'm not gonna feel it. And at the end of the day, it's not overbearing. It can like almost disappear under a cuff. It doesn't stick out like the Citizen PROMASTER does, which makes it a little more wearable for everyday use. This wears like the object it's meant to be, which is a hardcore tool watch, right? A purpose-built tool watch. And that's how it wears. But when I'm looking for a watch that I want to wear every day for any particular reason, just when I'm traveling, then this is a little more comfortable. And maybe that's enough, or maybe it isn't. We'll find out later in the video. But for wearability's sake, I got to give the point to the Farr and Swit Wayfinder. Now let's get into one of the more fun aspects of these particular watches, and for that I'm going to zoom right in. And that's the Lume, because the Lume is very special on both of these models. Now both watches have a great application of Lume on them. They're very different, but I love them both. And what's really nice about the Citizen PROMASTER, especially this particular colorway, the gilt colorway, is that green Lume they use looks amazing with the gilt colorway. It just looks awesome, and it's very long lasting. Of course, they've got the Lume pip at the 12 o'clock position on the bezel, and that's so they could actually meet the ISO 6425 compliance. You gotta have that Lume pip. But gorgeous Lume, especially on a gilt colorway. Now the Farr and Swit goes a different way with the Lume. And it's maybe the most special thing about this particular watch. It's what sets it apart. I have not done a test to see which one of these lasts longer, and I'm going to perform that. I won't show it to you because it'll be a bit boring, but I'll at least share the results with you. But watch this, right? A number of different types of Lume are utilized on the dial. And then the bezel itself is also lumed. It doesn't show up as much in this particular lighting, but when I go to the dark lighting, you'll see it perfectly. But yeah, this is gorgeous. I mean, the watch attracted me to begin with, and when I saw it fully loomed up, that was enough to get me to buy it, and that's the part that stands out. Let's go to the fully dark images. Now, once again, I'm going to begin with the Citizen PROMASTER. Look at that. Awesome. And now I'm going to switch to the Farr and Swit Wayfinder Diver 40. Look at that. I'm so glad this video is a matter of opinion and not fact, because there are so many things that are personal preference here versus what's maybe technically better. So when it comes to the Lume, I gotta give it to the Farr and Swit Wayfinder. I absolutely have to. Number one, the Lume's damn cool, right? It's not your typical Lume you're gonna see on the majority of dive watches out there. And number two, it actually lasted longer. It lasted longer. Now, I only hit them for 1 minute with an LED light, right? I hit it 1 minute with my flashlight, and then I let them sit, and you can just judge by the time that's indicated on the dial how much time has passed. But when we got to the a little over 2 hour mark, the Citizen was almost difficult to see. It was still there, but very difficult to see, whereas the Farr and Swit Wayfinder was a joke to read even from a distance. So it won. Not only does it have the cooler Lume application with multiple colors, but it's also got the longer lasting Lume, so point goes to the Farr and Swit Wayfinder. Now, when you look at what's inside these watches, it gets very different again. They both use Japanese movements, but the Citizen, of course, it's a Citizen, they own Miyota, so it uses an 8 series Miyota movement running at 3 Hertz. And then the Farr and Swit Wayfinder actually uses a Seiko movement, but it's the Mecha Quartz, the VH31 3-hander Seiko movement. So it gives the illusion of being an automatic. It has that more natural sweep than the tick you see on the majority of quartz models. But it's not at 3 Hertz. So you'll notice it a little bit more than you do on the actual Citizen ProMaster. And I'll put them side by side here. You can see it's very slight, very slight. I tend to notice it generally when both hands are at the bottom of the dial on the Citizen ProMaster. This being 3 Hertz is still not a truly smooth sweep, but it's smoother than what you get on the Farr and Swit Wayfinder. But which movement is better? Now, a lot of people are probably going to go with the automatic because it's an automatic. It goes back to the nostalgia of the whole thing. And why are we wearing a watch anyways? We don't need one anymore. We choose to wear them because it reminds us maybe of a better time, or it's a style choice. Versus quartz, which effectively killed a lot of the Swiss brands that were out there when Seiko released the original quartz Astron. But because of the popularity of the automatic style movements, even quartz movements now are making efforts to appear mechanical and having that smooth sweep. So which is better? Do you like batteries and the simplicity of maintaining a quartz, or do you prefer that mechanical movement that's powered by just the motion of your wrist? Which do you like better? I actually prefer the automatic. I dig the nostalgia. So I'm giving the points to the Citizen here, although it's quite close, to be honest. Because it's a Mecha Quartz, it's quite close. But I'm going to give the points to the Citizen because I love that true automatic movement. I'm going to give the points to the Citizen ProMaster here. They're getting the win in this category, but it's just a slight win. It's very close because I'm okay with Mecha Quartz movements because it's got that smoothish sweep. So I really appreciate both, but I got to give the edge to the automatic. And generally speaking, automatics usually cost more than quartz models. So seeing as though these two watches are around the same value, the same price, you're maybe technically getting a little bit more out of the Citizen, but then again, what does it cost them to put an 8 series movement in a watch? When judging the finishing on these models, they both do a very good job of the actual finishing given the price points. The Citizen ProMaster has an all-brushed, very tool watch aesthetic, whereas the Farr and Swit Wayfinder Diver 40 has a mostly brushed finish with just slight polished accents, gives it more of a desk diver look. Depending on your preference, maybe one appeals to you more than the other, but for me, if you're just judging the level of finishing, then I gotta go with the Farr and Swit Wayfinder. I really do. Now, I lean toward polished pieces. If you follow the channel, you'll know that. But there is just a little more that goes into the design of this particular watch than the ProMaster. It's just the design is a little superior when it comes to the two different watches. So the finishing itself it requires more to kind of make this look the way they wanted it to. And that's why it gets the points here. Build quality, I've put both of these through some abuse, all right? I've worn this on a couple of trips already. This I've used on a trip up north to the cottage, but I've also been wearing it at a job site where I've been operating multiple drills and the like, doing a home theater for a client. And neither watch shows much signs of wear. Like they can take some abuse, which is impressive. And usually the more polished a watch is, the more likely it is to show signs of wear, but that really hasn't been the case here. They can both take a beating. They're both made from 316L stainless steel, good quality steel. They both do a very good job of making a solid watch that you should be able to count on. I've dropped both of these watches. They've both taken it. They both keep pretty good time. I'm not disappointed with either. But which one am I going with? Which is the one that's going to end up staying in my watch box? Let's get to the conclusion. So which one am I going with? What's staying in the watch box? Because when you tally up the points, it's pretty close. There are a number of categories that they're kind of dead even on. And then you have the 4 positives of the Farr and Swit Wayfinder versus the 3 positives of the Citizen PROMASTER. But depending on how you weigh those positives, one could maybe usurp the other. Maybe having an automatic movement is a deal breaker for the majority of you, in which case you're going Citizen PROMASTER. Maybe having something like really cool Lume is something you don't have in your watch box, so you lean toward the Farr and Swit Wayfinder Diver 40. But the deciding factor for me in this particular case was the wearability. It's how much I enjoy wearing each watch on my wrist, and I don't enjoy wearing the Citizen PROMASTER nearly as much as I enjoy wearing the Farr and Swit Wayfinder Diver 40. The wearing experience is so much better, in fact, that it surprised me. I didn't expect it to be that much better. I only noticed it when I decided I'm going to do a comparison between these two watches, because the reality is I didn't even realize I don't wear the Citizen PROMASTER all that often. I really don't. I wear it when a situation sort of requires it. If I know I got to go out in a rainstorm, there's no getting around it, I'd be like, oh, it's going to be heavy rain today. I'm going to throw on the Citizen PROMASTER because I trust its diver's rating. I trust its water resistance. So I'd wear it. I had so many other watches I'd rather wear than the Citizen PROMASTER, but I didn't realize it was because of the wearing experience. It was because of how the Citizen PROMASTER feels on my wrist. It wasn't until I decided to do this comparison that I realized how much nicer this feels on my wrist than the Citizen PROMASTER, and I started to pay attention to how much nicer all of my watches feel on wrist than the Citizen PROMASTER. So as much as I love the Citizen PROMASTER, and I understand its uses, and I've used it for its design purposes, if I'm only going to keep one watch, it's going to be the one I enjoy wearing more. That could essentially do everything the Citizen PROMASTER does, maybe not to the same levels, but well enough that I'm not worried about it. So in this comparison, the Microbrand wins out. Not because it offers more value, but because it offers something unique and a more enjoyable wearing experience for me. Which one would you have picked? Let me know in the comments. And if you haven't yet, support the channel. subscribe, hit that notification bell, don't miss another video. And when we get to 5,000, we're giving away a watch. Maybe you'll be the lucky winner. Till next time.